The air was thick with tension, the kind that clung to every breath, every heartbeat as the crowd gathered in the cold, metallic arena. A hush fell over the audience, the kind of silence that only comes before something momentous, something that would change everything. In the center of the arena, bound in chains, stood a human. His name was Marcus, and he had been branded a traitor. His eyes, though filled with a sense of defeat, betrayed a flicker of defiance. They had captured him on charges too severe for anyone to ignore, and now he was about to pay the ultimate price. The sound of his chains echoed in the silence as he stood tall, despite the overwhelming weight of his crime. The alien judges, high-ranking officials of the Galactic Empire, stood at their podiums, their faces unreadable behind their dark, polished visors. They were unmoving, their presence cold and commanding. Around the arena, soldiers stood like statues, their weapons trained on the traitor, ready to ensure that no one intervened. The crowd, made up of different species from across the galaxy, had come to witness the final moments of Marcus. Their expressions were a mixture of anticipation, fear, and fascination. Some looked at him with disgust, others with indifference, but no one, not a single person, seemed ready to do anything about it. The verdict had been decided long ago. Marcus had been found guilty of leaking critical military intelligence to the enemy, an unforgivable act in the eyes of the alien rulers. His punishment was set: death. But what made his fate even more tragic was the fact that no one had come forward to defend him. He had been abandoned by his own people, forsaken by those he thought were his allies. No one dared to speak for the traitor. No one dared to challenge the overwhelming might of the alien empire. The lights in the arena flickered briefly, casting long shadows over the steel floor. The sound of boots on metal echoed through the vast space as the head of the council stepped forward. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if savoring the moment. He spoke in a voice that carried across the arena, cold and unwavering. Marcus, the head of the council, intoned, "You stand here today because you betrayed the very people who trusted you. Your actions have endangered the galaxy itself. There is no redemption for one who would sell out their own kind. The sentence is death." The words hung in the air like a death knell, and the crowd stirred, murmuring in agreement. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't even look at the head of the council. His eyes remained focused on the ground, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He had known this was coming. He had known from the moment he made the decision to act that his fate was sealed. But that didn't mean he was ready to die. Not like this. Not without a fight. The council member nodded to the guards standing nearby. They moved forward, their weapons raised, preparing to drag Marcus to his execution. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of impending death. The silence was so profound that it felt suffocating. But just as the guards reached out to seize him, something unexpected happened. From the crowd, from the darkness of the arena, a single voice called out, clear and strong, "I'll protect him." The words were simple, yet they carried an unimaginable weight. The crowd fell into stunned silence, everyone turning toward the source of the voice. It was a human, someone who had been standing in the shadows, unnoticed until that very moment. He was tall, with sharp features and a stern expression, but there was something more in his eyes. There was something that the crowd couldn't quite place, something that defied the norm. His voice was unwavering, full of conviction. "I will not stand by and let this man die without a fight." The alien judges exchanged confused glances. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, not knowing how to react. A human defending a traitor? This was unheard of. No one had ever dared to stand up for a traitor, let alone speak out against the ruling authorities. And yet, here was one human, prepared to risk everything for a man who had sold out his own kind. For a brief moment, everything seemed to stop. Time hung suspended in the air. The alien soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons, unsure whether to react. The head of the council raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by the sudden turn of events. He stepped forward, his voice cold, but curious. "And what makes you think you have the right to speak for this traitor?" he asked, his tone sharp, his words deliberate. The human's gaze never wavered. Because what's right isn't decided by power. It's decided by the courage to stand up, even when no one else will. The council member sneered, as if amused, by the defiance, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, something uncertain. He looked back at the soldier standing beside him, who was holding a weapon ready, poised to act. The soldier hesitated for just a moment as if unsure whether to follow orders. The human stepped closer to the traitor, his hands still empty, no weapons in sight. He didn't need them. His mere presence, the sheer determination in his posture, was enough to send a message he was not going to back down. "Let him go," the human repeated, his voice steady. And then, for the first time in this long, tense moment, the audience saw something they had never expected. The alien soldiers took a step back. The crowd gasped. The impossible was happening. The human had done what no one else would do. He had defied the powerful alien empire. He had spoken out against the rulers, standing up for what was right, even when the odds were stacked against him. And in that one moment, he had changed everything. As the silence lingered in the air, one question remained. Would this brave human be able to change the fate of the traitor? Or would he, too, fall victim to the Empire's wrath? The tension in the arena was so thick it felt as though the air itself had frozen. The crowd was still in shock, their collective breath caught in their throats. No one had expected a human, especially not one so ordinary-looking, to step forward and challenge the council. The traitor Marcus stood wide-eyed, a mixture of disbelief and hope spreading across his face. Had he heard correctly? Was someone actually standing up for him? The alien guards, who moments before were ready to execute Marcus without question, now hesitated. They exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to proceed. The orders from the council were clear. No one was to interfere, especially not a human. Yet, here was this lone figure, defiantly speaking out, refusing to back down. The human who had spoken was still standing in the center of the arena, his gaze locked on the alien officials. His stance was unwavering, his shoulders squared, as though he had already made up his mind about what he had to do. There was no sign of fear in his eyes, only determination and resolve. "Step aside, soldier," the human commanded, his voice now ringing through the arena, clear and firm. "This is not your fight. It's mine." The alien guards exchanged another look, and for a split second, it almost seemed as though they were debating whether to move forward. The council member at the head of the arena remained silent, his sharp, calculating eyes fixed on the human. The energy in the air shifted. This wasn't the way things were supposed to unfold. In a galaxy ruled by power, a single human stepping up to defy a traitor's punishment was unheard of. The head of the council, his voice cold as steel, finally broke the silence. "You're interfering in the laws of the Empire, human. The punishment for betrayal is death, and no one, not even you, can change that." The council member's words were final, but the human didn't flinch. He didn't back away, didn't even seem to entertain the thought of retreat. Instead, his gaze moved to Marcus, who was still trembling in his chains, his heart racing with the possibility of salvation. "You may be the one to decide, but I am the one who will act," the human replied, his words deliberate, each syllable dripping with defiance. The alien guards shifted, their fingers twitching on their triggers as if sensing the shift in the balance of power. The head of the council nodded, a signal to his soldiers. The order was clear. Either the human would stand down or they would force him to. But the human remained firm, unmoved, staring directly at the guards. His eyes burned with a silent intensity. His posture suggested that he wasn't just fighting for Marcus anymore. He was fighting for something greater, something far more significant. In that moment it became clear. This wasn't just about saving a traitor. It was about challenging the authority that had ruled with absolute power for far too long. Marcus, the traitor, couldn't believe his eyes. He had never expected someone to risk everything for him. In his time of darkness, when he thought no one would ever care, this human had stepped forward. The weight of the moment sank deep into his chest, and a strange sense of gratitude filled him, even though he couldn't yet fully grasp what this could mean for him. The alien guard stood their ground, hesitant now. The human wasn't just any man. There was something different about him. He exuded an energy that seemed almost untouchable. Something in his presence made the soldiers uneasy, as if they were facing a force they couldn't quite understand. "Do you think you can defeat us?" one of the alien soldiers asked, his voice laced with mockery, but there was fear beneath it. "Do you think your courage will save you?" The human's lips curled into a faint but resolute smile. "I don't need to defeat you," he said. "I need to make you see what you're about to do. You're making a mistake." The crowd, still silent, felt the gravity of the moment. Every pair of eyes in the arena was fixed on the human and the alien soldiers. It was as if time had slowed down, and everyone waited, holding their breath to see what would happen next. Jakir, soldier who had spoken, took a step forward, his weapon raised in a silent threat. "Then you leave me no choice," he said, his voice now tinged with the deadly seriousness of his duty. But just as he took a step closer to the human, the unexpected happened. The human raised his hand, and in a smooth motion, he pulled something from beneath his coat. The metallic glint of a small, sharp blade caught the light, and the alien guards froze. It wasn't much, just a small blade, but in the hands of this determined human, it seemed like the most powerful weapon in the universe. The human's next words were quiet, but cut through the tension like a knife. "I will not let you harm him. You're not going to kill anyone today." The alien guards hesitated, and in that moment of uncertainty the crowd saw it, the first crack in the Empire's unshakable power. They could feel the rising tension as both sides prepared for a clash. The alien soldiers were powerful, but the human was quick, resourceful, and fueled by something they didn't understand, something deeper than just survival. It was the will to defy a system built on fear and oppression. The crowd's anticipation was palpable as they waited for the confrontation to begin. Every movement, every breath felt charged with the possibility of change. And in that moment, the human made his move. With a quick, fluid motion, he lunged forward. The guards attempted to react, but the human's speed caught them off guard. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for something bigger, something the Empire had forgotten long ago. The will to fight for what is right. As the guards hesitated, unsure of their next move, the tension reached its peak. The crowd could hardly believe what they were witnessing. A single human standing up against an entire empire, ready to face whatever came next. The suspense hung in the air like a storm about to break, and then, just when it seemed like the human might win the first round, the head of the council gave a sharp, commanding order. The soldiers moved into position, and the fight began in earnest. The audience held their breath, waiting for what would happen next. Would the human's stand be enough to save the traitor, or would the Empire crush him beneath its boot? The true battle had only just begun. The arena had transformed into a battleground, one that neither side could afford to lose. The human, standing tall and resolute, faced the alien soldiers who had once held the upper hand. The crowd, once filled with uncertainty, now felt the electric charge of anticipation in the air. The time for words had passed. Now was the moment for action. The first alien soldier, a towering figure with gleaming red armor, lunged toward the human with terrifying speed. The human's instincts kicked in, and he sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the soldier's heavy weapon. The crowd gasped as the soldier stumbled, momentarily losing his balance, but the human didn't hesitate. He pressed forward, using his small blade to deflect the soldier's next strike, the metallic sound ringing throughout the arena. The soldier's weapon clanged harmlessly off the human's improvised shield. For a moment, it seemed like the human might stand a chance, but the odds were stacked against him. More soldiers closed in, surrounding him from all sides. The head of the council, watching intently from his elevated perch, clenched his fists. He had underestimated this human, an error that might cost him dearly. "You think you can take on the entire empire?" one of the soldiers sneered, raising his weapon high. "You are nothing." The human, breathless but defiant, shot a glare at the soldier. "I'm not just fighting for myself," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. "I'm fighting for everyone who's been silenced." His words seemed to strike a chord with the crowd. A few whispered in disbelief, others in admiration. This human wasn't just standing up for the traitor, he was standing up for the very principle that the Empire had trampled upon for centuries: justice, honor, and the right to make a stand. With a surge of adrenaline, the human kicked off the ground and charged at the closest soldier. The soldier swung his weapon down in an attempt to crush the human, but he was fast. In a breathtaking move, the human ducked under the blow, spinning on his heels to strike the soldier's unguarded side. The alien's armor cracked under the pressure, and the soldier staggered back in surprise. The arena erupted in noise as the human landed a solid blow, knocking the soldier off balance. The audience, many of whom had expected the human to fall within moments, was now on the edge of their seats. This was no ordinary fight. The human wasn't just defending the traitor. He was proving that sometimes sheer willpower and determination could level the playing field. But the soldiers quickly regrouped. They closed in tighter, and the human found himself surrounded, outnumbered. Their weapons, far superior in technology and design, gave them an edge that the human couldn't deny. The glow of their weapons reflected off the walls of the arena, casting an eerie light over the scene. "Give up," one of the soldiers barked, the threat in his voice unmistakable. "You can't win. Surrender and we'll spare your life." But the human, panting and bloodied, refused to give in. "I didn't come here to surrender. I came to show you that your empire is not invincible." As the soldiers closed in, the human's mind raced. He was running out of options. His blade was small, his movements were growing sluggish, and the alien soldiers' attacks were coming faster. His only hope was the traitor. Marcus, who had been watching from a distance, still in chains, was beginning to realize that this was his chance. The human had given him a lifeline, and now he had to make a choice. The human's resolve didn't falter, even as he faced overwhelming odds. He knew the fight might be lost, but the battle for honor was far from over. He had to show the Empire that even in defeat, there was strength in standing up for what was right. In a flash of inspiration, Marcus reached down, grabbing the broken remains of the soldier's weapon that had been knocked out of his hand earlier. He could feel the weight of the weapon in his grasp, and for the first time in a long while he felt a sense of purpose, a reason to fight. Without hesitation, he broke free from his chains, his limbs stiff from being bound for so long, but his resolve burning brighter than ever. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Marcus the traitor stepped forward. He raised the weapon in his hand, his face hardening with determination. He was no longer the prisoner, no longer the one abandoned by all. With the human's sacrifice on the line, Marcus knew he had to fight. With a scream of defiance, Marcus hurled himself into the fray, joining the human's side in a desperate attempt to turn the tide of the battle. The soldiers, caught off guard by his sudden movement, hesitated for a split second. That was all the human needed. The two of them, united in their shared fight, began to push back against the alien forces. The human's agility and quick thinking, paired with Marcus's newfound strength, created a whirlwind of movement that forced the soldiers to retreat step by step. The crowd, once uncertain, now erupted in cheers. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. The traitor, the one who had been sentenced to death, was now fighting alongside the very human who had risked everything to protect him. The alien. Soldiers, unable to match the unexpected teamwork of the human and Marcus, found themselves on the defensive. The human's blade flashed in the air as he parried blow after blow, while Marcus, fueled by a mix of guilt and newfound bravery, fought with the raw fury of someone who had nothing left to lose. The head of the council's face was a mask of fury. He had underestimated the human's ability to inspire, to defy the odds. He had believed that the Empire's might would crush any resistance. But this was no longer about military power. It was about something deeper. Something that no weapon could destroy. "Enough!" The council member's voice rang out, his words carrying across the battlefield. "This ends now." But the damage had already been done. The human had proven that even in the face of overwhelming power, honor and courage could create cracks in the Empire's foundation. The fight was far from over, but the Empire had lost its grip, even if just for a moment. As the alien forces began to retreat, the human and Marcus stood tall, side by side. They had made it through the battle, but they knew the war was far from over. What came next would be even harder. But they had won the first fight, and that was enough to make the galaxy rethink everything it thought it knew about power, justice, and the will to fight. The audience watched in awe, realizing that this was more than just a fight. It was a symbol. The human and the traitor had become something bigger than themselves. They had become a beacon of hope in a galaxy ruled by fear. And for the first time in a long while, it seemed like there might be a chance for change. The battle had raged and the dust had settled, but the tension in the arena was far from over. The human and Marcus stood together, their bodies bruised and bloodied from the fight, but their spirits unbroken. The alien soldiers had retreated, for now, but the head of the council's command still loomed like a dark shadow over the arena. The head of the council, now standing at the center of the arena, glared at the human and the traitor. His expression was one of cold fury, yet there was something else beneath it, something that hinted at respect. The human's defiance had shaken him to the core. He had underestimated the power of conviction, the strength that could arise from one person willing to challenge everything. And now there was no turning back. The silence was deafening. No one spoke. No one moved. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for what would come next. The human, his face a mask of determination, stepped forward. His eyes met the council leader's gaze without flinching. He knew what was coming, the final moment, the decision that would determine the fate of both himself and the traitor. Duaug, you still believe you can win? The head of the council's voice rang out, steady but with an edge of doubt. You've caused chaos. You've defied our laws. But in the end, you will fall. The Empire will not tolerate your rebellion. The human's eyes remained locked on the council leader, but he did not respond immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze to Marcus, who stood silently by his side. The traitor had witnessed firsthand the brutality of the Empire, and now, for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to fight for something greater than himself. The human had shown him the true meaning of courage, not just fighting for survival, but standing up for what is right, regardless of the consequences. Marcus looked at the human, his face a mixture of gratitude and fear. The moment had arrived. The human's actions had already cost him so much, his life was on the line. But for Marcus, the decision was clear. He couldn't let the human bear this burden alone. This was his fight too. The tension in the arena grew unbearable as the council leader raised his hand, signaling the alien soldiers to move into position once more. The threat of violence hung heavy in the air, but the human and Marcus remained resolute. They would not be intimidated. The time for submission had passed. They had made their stand. And then the council leader spoke again, this time with a chilling calmness in his voice. You have proven your strength, human, but you've also proven your foolishness. You dared to defy the Empire to protect a traitor, a man who endangered us all. For that, you will pay the ultimate price. The words hit like a physical blow, but the human did not flinch. He stood tall, his heart pounding in his chest, but his resolve unshaken. He knew that he had already won, even if it cost him everything. He had inspired something in Marcus, a spark of hope that could never be extinguished. No matter the outcome, they had changed the course of history. Do what you must, the human said, his voice firm. But know this. You can destroy us, but you cannot destroy the truth. The galaxy is not your empire to control. Not anymore. The council leader's eyes flickered with something, an emotion that was as fleeting as it was dangerous. For a moment, the human saw a shift in his gaze, a glimmer of hesitation. It was subtle, but undeniable. Could it be fear? Could it be that the human had planted a seed of doubt in the council leader's mind? For the briefest moment, the head of the council seemed to struggle with his decision. Then, as if snapping back to his cold, calculated demeanor, he stepped forward, his gaze locking with the human's once more. It's too late for change, the council leader declared, his voice now tinged with finality. You've chosen your path, and now you must walk it to the end. The alien soldiers advanced, their weapons raised and aimed at the human and Marcus. The crowd watched in breathless silence, unable to look away from the inevitable clash that was about to unfold. But just as the soldiers prepared to strike, something unexpected happened. The doors of the arena swung open with a loud crash, and a massive group of humans, once silent and subjugated, stormed into the arena. They were led by a figure, the leader of the human rebellion, a woman whose name had been whispered in hushed tones across the galaxy. She was a symbol of resistance, of hope in the face of overwhelming oppression. The rebellion had come. They had been watching, waiting, and now they had arrived. The head of the council froze, his expression one of shock and disbelief. He had thought the humans were broken, that their will to resist had been crushed. But here they were, standing, together, ready to fight. The council leader realized in that moment that the tide had turned. The human defiance, the courage of one man standing up for another, had sparked a revolution. "Stand down," the leader of the rebellion called out, her voice filled with authority. "This is over." The alien soldiers, caught off guard by the sudden uprising, hesitated. They had never faced this level of resistance before. For the first time, they were not the unstoppable force. They were the ones who were vulnerable. The council leader looked at the humans flooding into the arena, then back at the human and Marcus, standing side by side. His face twisted in fury, but there was something else. Something deep within him. That seemed to break. The weight of his decision crashed down on him. For the first time in his life, he questioned the empire he had served so blindly. He saw the faces of the humans, those he had thought weak, subjugated, and realized that they were no longer afraid. They were ready to fight. The head of the council turned and walked away, his head bowed, defeated. It was a moment that no one in the arena would ever forget. The Empire's grip on the galaxy had faltered. And in that moment, the human who had defied all odds to protect the traitor had changed everything. The human and Marcus stood, their heads held high, as the rebellion flooded the arena. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, there was hope. Together they had defeated the Empire, not through violence but through the power of unity and the courage to stand up for what was right. And as the rebels cheered, Marcus turned to the human, his voice filled with gratitude. "You saved us all." The human smiled, his voice soft but filled with pride. "No," he said, looking around at the people now rising in defiance. "We saved ourselves." The arena was filled with the sounds of victory, but it wasn't just the victory of a single person. It was the victory of all who had the courage to stand up, to fight for a future where freedom, honor, and justice could thrive once again. The ultimate decision had been made. The Empire was no more, and a new chapter for humanity had begun.